in the case of severe drought in the preceding years, were pretty nearly uniform in size throughout each section. The prairie section of the state left its indelible imprint on the cattle bred in the open country, while the coast, as well as the piney woods and blackjack sections, did the same, thus making classification easy. McCann overtook us early in the evening, and being an obliging fellow, was induced by Forrest to stand the first guard with Honeyman, so as to make up the proper number of watches, though with only 2 men on guard at a time, for it was hardly possible that any of the others would return before daybreak. There was much to be seen in Dodge, and as losing a night's sleep on duty was considered nothing, in hilarious recreation sleep would be entirely forgotten. McCann had not forgotten us, but had smuggled out a quart bottle to cut the alkali in our drinking water. But a quart amongst 8 of us was not dangerous, so the night passed without incident, though we felt a growing impatience to get into town. As we expected, about sunrise the next morning, our men off on holiday rode into camp, having never closed an eye during the entire night. They brought word from Flood that the herd would only graze over to Saw Log Creek that day, so as to let the remainder of us have a day and night in town. Lovell would only advance half a month's wages, $25 to the man. It was ample for any personal needs. Though we had nearly 3 months' wages due, no one protested, for the old man was generally right in his decisions. According to their report, the boys had had a hog-killing time, old man Don having been out with them all night. It seems that McNulta stood in well with a class of practical jokers, which included the officials of the town, and whenever there was anything on the tapis, he always got the word for himself and friends. During breakfast, Fox Quarternight told this incident of the evening. Some professor, a professor in the occult sciences I think he called himself, had written to the mayor to know what kind of point Dodge would be for a lecture. The lecture was to be free, but he also intimated that he had a card or 2 on the side up his sleeve, by which he expected to graft onto some of the coin of the realm from the wayfaring men as well as the citizen. The mayor turned the letter over to Bat Masterson, the city marshal, who answered it and invited the professor to come, assuring him that he was deeply interested in the occult sciences, personally, and would take pleasure in securing him a hall and a date, besides announcing his coming through the papers. Well, he was billed to deliver his lecture last night. Those old longhorns, McNulta and Lovell, got us in with the crowd, and while they didn't know exactly what was coming, they assured us that we couldn't afford to miss it. Well, at the appointed hour in the evening, the hall was packed, not over half being able to find seats. It is safe to say there were over 500 men present, as it was announced for men only. Every gambler in town was there, with a fair sprinkling of cowmen and our tribe. At the appointed hour, Masterson, as chairman, rapped for order, and in a neat little speech announced the object of the meeting. Bat mentioned the lack of interest in the West in the higher arts and sciences, and bespoke our careful attention to the subject under consideration for the evening. He said he felt it hardly necessary to urge the importance of good order, but if any one had come out of idle curiosity or bent on mischief, as chairman of the meeting and peace officer of the city, he would certainly brook no interruptions. After a few other appropriate remarks, he introduced the speaker as Dr. J. Graves Brown, the noted scientist. The professor was an oily-tongued fellow, and led off on the prelude to his lecture, while the audience was quiet as mice and grave as owls. After he had spoken about 5 minutes and was getting warmed up to his subject, he made an assertion which sounded a little fishy, and someone back in the audience blurted out, "That's a damned lie." The speaker halted in his discourse and looked at Masterson, who arose and, drawing 2 6-shooters, looked the audience over as if trying to locate the offender. Laying the guns down on the table, he informed the meeting that another interruption would cost the offender his life, if he had to follow him to the Rio Grande or the British possessions. He then asked the professor, as there would be no further interruptions, to proceed with his lecture. The professor hesitated about going on, when Masterson assured him that it was evident that his audience, with the exception of one skulking coyote, was deeply interested in the subject, but that no one man could interfere with the freedom of speech in Dodge, as long as it was a free country and he was city marshal. After this little talk the speaker braced up and launched out again on his lecture. When he was once more under good headway, he had the occasion to relate an exhibition which he had witnessed while studying his profession in India. The incident related was a trifle rank for any one to swallow raw, when the same party who had interrupted before sang out, "That's another damned lie." Masterson came to his feet like a flash, a gun in each hand, saying, "Stand up, you measly skunk, so I can see you." Half a dozen men rose in different parts of the house and cut loose at him. As they did so, the lights went out and the room filled with smoke. Masterson was blazing away with his two guns, which so lighted up the rostrum that we could see the professor crouching under the table. Of course they were using blank cartridges, but the audience raised the long yell and poured out through the windows and doors, and the lecture was over. A couple of police came in later, so McNulta said, escorted the professor to his room in the hotel, and quietly advised him that Dodge was hardly capable of appreciating anything so advanced as a lecture on the occult sciences. Breakfast over, Honeyman ran in the remuda, and we caught the best horses in our mounts, on which to pay our respects to Dodge. Forrest detailed Rod Wheat to wrangle the horses, for we intended to take Honeyman with us. As it was only about 6 miles over to the Saw Log, Quince advised that they graze along Duck Creek until after dinner, and then graze over to the former stream during the afternoon. Before leaving, we rode over and looked out the trail after it left Duck, for it was quite possible that we might return during the night, and we requested McCann to hang out the lantern, elevated on the end of the wagon tongue as a beacon. After taking our bearings, we reined southward over the divide to Dodge. "The very first thing I do," said Quince Forrest, as we rode leisurely along, "after I get a shave and a haircut, and buy what few tricks I need, is to hunt up that gambler in the Long Branch and ask him to take a drink with me. I took the parting one on him. Then I'll simply set in and win back every dollar I lost there last year. There's something in this northern air that I breathe in this morning that tells me that this is my lucky day. You other kids had better let the games alone and save your money to buy red silk handkerchiefs and soda water and such harmless gimcracks." The fact that the Rebel was 10 years his senior never entered his mind as he gave us this fatherly advice, though to be sure the majority of us were his juniors in years. On reaching Dodge, we rode up to the Wright House, where Flood met us and directed our cavalcade across the railroad to a livery stable, the proprietor of which was a friend of Lovell's. We unsaddled and turned our horses into a large corral, and while we were in the office of the livery surrendering our artillery, Flood came in and handed each of us $25 in gold, warning us that when that was gone, no more would be advanced. On receipt of the money, we scattered like partridges before a gunner. Within an hour or two, we began to return to the stables by ones and twos, and were stowing in our saddle pockets our purchases, which ran from needles and thread to 45 cartridges, and every mother's son reflecting the art of the barber, while John Officer had his blond mustache blackened, waxed, and curled like a French dancing master. "If some of you boys will hold him," said Moss Strayhorn, commenting on Officer's appearance, "I'd like to take a good smell of him, just to see if he took oil up there where the end of his neck haired over." As Officer already had several drinks comfortably stowed away under his belt and stood up strong 6 feet 2, none of us volunteered. After packing away our plunder, we sauntered around town, drinking moderately and visiting the various saloons and gambling houses. I clung to my bunkie.